welcome to my channel. I'm Claire Longo, and today I'm talking you through the evolution of a personal project. This is going to be really a guide to creating and executing a meaningful personal project in the field of AI and data science. And I'm also going to kind of talk you through the personal project that I worked on and talk you through how it really evolved over time. So my personal project is called ClaireBot. I'll link it up below. I've done a blog post on it. What ClaireBot is it is a OpenAI-backed LLM bot, and it is built to mimic my personality. So it's a simple chatbot that has been augmented by my own personal social media data so that it responds in my tone of voice and also reflects some of my ideas and opinions. The reason I did this personal project is because I wanted to learn some of the latest and greatest tools around LLMs today, and the best way for me to learn something is just to do it hands-on. So let's talk about why we should do personal projects in the first place. Personal projects, I think, are the best way to learn, just doing things hands-on. They help you build a portfolio. You're actually executing a real project that then you can showcase on your resume, as well as showcase some of your code to potential employers. So it really builds up some portfolio for yourself. It also facilitates learning new tools. I can read about new tools all the time, all day. I can listen to YouTube videos, take courses, but I'm not actually going to remember those tools or develop my own kind of best practices or be aware of the gotchas until I use it hands-on myself. So by scoping and executing your own personal project, this is the best way to actually just use those tools hands-on to learn them and use it in an environment that kind of simulates what a real project might look like in the real world. The other reason to do personal projects, and I think this is one that some people miss sometimes, is to kind of show your business acumen and project management skills. And to do this, we don't want to just take a predefined personal project off the shelf and execute it. There's great projects that have already been kind of scoped for you on Kaggle and that kind of thing that do kind of get you hands-on with the tools, which is great. But my recommendation with personal projects is to take it a step further by creating a personal project that really simulates what a project is going to be in real life once you land that dream job. And what this means is you're going to be working with messy data. You're going to collect your own data instead of working with data that's already curated for you. You're also going to be involved in the definition, scoping, and prioritization of the project itself instead of just following some predefined steps with pre-written code. You're also going to have to tune the code specifically to get it to work for this unique use case that you've identified, which means you're going to get not just hands-on with the code, but you're actually going to really start working with the code and the tools in the way you would in the real world. So how do we define that winning personal project in the first place? Here's a list of tips here. Number one is build for somebody. Don't just build in a silo. In the real world, building a silo is not a great experience. It's actually kind of a red flag that I look for when I'm interviewing people. So we build better as a team. We build better together. So if you're building for somebody or if you're partnering with other people in this personal project, you're simulating what it'd be like to work on a project with a team or with stakeholders or with a customer. So I recommend find somebody to build for or somebody to build with. This could be a customer, someone who's actually going to use whatever you build, or it could be a collaborator or an advisor, just somebody to break you out of that echo chamber. Number two is understand your use case. Make it something that you're passionate about. The best data scientists and machine learning engineers understand and care deeply about where they're actually applying machine learning. I understand that machine learning AI, it's very broad. You can apply it to so many different fields. But if we're applying it somewhere to something that we care about, we're going to be a little bit more invested. And the best data scientists and machine learning engineers take that time to wear the customer's shoes, understand their stakeholders, actually dog food and use the product themselves. So if you build something that you care about, it's just going to kind of facilitate that experience for you. Step three here, design the entire project end to end. Yeah, you're kind of managing your own project here. And I know that in the real world, you'll probably have a project manager, but it helps to be able to put yourself in that person's shoes and be able to break the project up into digestible chunks, prioritize them, scope the project. What does an MVP look like? That's very important. Also, identify, collect, and clean your own data. I know this is the hard part. There's a saying out there that data scientists spend 80% of their time cleaning and mucking around with their data, and I'm sorry, I do think there's probably a tooling gap there that can get better to make that easier for people, and I know there's a lot of people working on that. But in the real world, when you're working on a project, you're not going to be handed a clean, curated data set like you would find on Kaggle. You're going to have to go out and think through like what even data is available to me or could I collect to solve this problem that I've defined. So instead of like fitting the project to data that exists, you should define a project that's useful and then go through that exercise of trying to collect clean and identify data that's going to help you solve that problem. Create tech debt, so don't make your project perfect. Perfectionism is the enemy of delivering value, I think. As you go through your personal project, there's gonna be a lot of things that you want to do to make it better. And you're gonna have to make that call of what you're gonna actually invest your time in doing and what you're going to kind of take note of and maybe save for a later time. I think it's great to know how you would make the project perfect or the next steps that you would take. It's really good to be aware of kind of the tech debt or the next steps that you're generating as you move through the project. But if you try to execute everything, you might not be spending your time in the right places. You might go down a rabbit hole, go down a tangent a little bit. And what are your returns on that? We're trying to build our portfolio. We're trying to showcase our code. We're trying to learn a new tool. If this project becomes so large in scope that it's going to consume a lot of your time and energy to make it perfect, maybe you should build a company around it if it's a valuable project, a valuable product that you're building. So just take note of what you're creating, but you don't have to get this perfect. Remember, this is a personal project. Keep your goals with it in mind as you kind of scope things out and execute it, but definitely take note of what that like next steps would be if you had the time. So to kick off the project, one of the first things I did is I took note of the technologies I wanted to learn. Through executing this project, what technologies did I really want to come out of it feeling I had a pretty good grasp on? So I made a list of what I really wanted to learn in the LLM space. I wanted to understand orchestration tools, vector databases, prompt engineering, model hallucinations, and the RAG system. Then there were some open questions that I wanted to address with my work, just some things that were on my mind that I was curious about, wanted to dive into and research a little bit. Number one, can I accomplish this project without incurring the cost of fine-tuning? I know there's a lot of talk about fine-tuning versus just augmenting your system with a knowledge base and injecting context data into the prompt. I wanted to really see how far I could get with the RAG and evaluate if we wanted to take this to the next step and figure out the fine-tuning piece. Another question I had that I still have on my mind, are hallucinations really a problem? I understand in some context when you need your LLM system to really work within some very well predefined guardrails that meet like a business use case standard or something, the hallucinations are definitely concerning in that scenario. But also, I think of hallucinations as kind of a prediction. Like this is a language model, it's probabilistic. And when the model makes something up, essentially what it's doing is like, you gave it a prompt, it used the brain within the model and spit out a statistically likely response. And so that's what a prediction looks like. That's inference in machine learning. And the fact that we're like, oh, hallucinations, we have to stop them, we have to put in guardrails. I feel like it's a little bit overkill. Like I totally think you do in a lot of use cases where you're really, really trying to control that output. But if you're trying to be creative or if you're trying to predict something, that is what these models are doing. And so I wanted to play around with kind of the concept of hallucination, make this model hallucinate, put guardrails on it and see like, what are the trade-offs here? Depending on your use case, like am I actually able to get value from hallucinations? Does it add value to the system? So we'll talk through that a little bit. The other thing I wanted to explore is I wanted to figure out how to make the system learn from itself over time. I can orchestrate this, put it all together, augment it with my social media data, and then it's like, cool, it's frozen in time. How do I actually make the system learn from interacting with me, with itself, with other users? I wanted a feedback loop in this thing. I want this thing to get better over time. So I'll talk through how I set that up, how I put that infrastructure in place, and give an example of it in action, which is pretty cool to see. All right, so here's what I built. I built ClaireBot. Here's kind of an architecture diagram that shows what I put together. It's really ugly, don't judge my artwork here. It's not AI generated. But essentially what I did is I created a RAG system that is built on top of OpenAI using LangChain. And it uses LLMs and a knowledge base to respond in a chat interface to the user. And it takes on the personality of Claire. And my goal with augmenting the system with my own social media data, I went across LinkedIn, YouTube, I even tried to get my email data in there, some of my personal writing. My goal with that was to make this bot respond in an interesting way that sounded like me. I wanted it to kind of like, if you ask it a question and get a response, it should be like, oh, like that's what Claire would probably say, or that's what Claire would think. This is much more interesting to me because when I'm working with ChatGPT, it gives these kind of boring, generic answers. That's not helpful if I'm trying to like draft an email that sounds like myself. It's not helpful if I'm trying to think creatively or brainstorm. And so I really wanted to see if I could get these LLM systems to respond in a more interesting way and if this might be a way to do it. So the tools I used here was LangChain, Chroma database, vector database. I'm in a collab notebook, of course, and then I tinkered around with Arise, Phoenix open source for evaluating the data within the LLM and looking for like context gaps and visualizing the kind of knowledge base as well. So then I broke the project up into steps. This helps me scope things, it helps me stay on track, not go on any tangents. And keep in mind, you might kind of flex this as you learn and go, and you might realize, oh, I gotta loop back to this step and do it a little bit differently. Whatever, that's fine, but you still kind of need a few steps laid out, just know where you're going. So the MVP kind of project steps here was step one, make a dumb chatbot, no vector database, no context data, no feedback loop, just get a dumb basic chatbot working on top of OpenAI with LangChain. Then I wanted to personalize the chatbot. So step two is personalize. Start using prompt engineering, inject context data, all that. Step three is kind of create that feedback loop. And then step four is figure out ways to actually evaluate the system. How do I measure if the system is working? So I started out by collecting data. After having an idea of like what I wanted to build and why, then I was able to go out and find what data might be useful to put this thing together. What I did is I was able to grab some of my personal social media data out of some of these social media platforms. So I got some LinkedIn data, some Instagram data. You can download your entire Gmail inbox. I don't recommend it. It's probably a very large download if you're anything like me and don't delete your emails. But I did get some Gmail data that I wanted to throw in there, as well as I have like some personal writing, some documents that I threw in there for voice as well. So once I had all the data collected, the interesting thing to note here is this data is in like many different formats. So we're talking PDFs, we're talking HTML, we're talking video. And so that made me think of something interesting that I hadn't really thought of before starting the project. And this is an example of where like your scope may kind of change a little bit as you work through the project. But I realized that we're starting to think about how we actually ingest and get value out of data in very different formats. Now, in the tabular machine learning world, I would have to do so much data cleaning and pre-processing to like get this data in a format that could even be useful in the model. And for this personal project, I was starting to see that there might be a ton of value with like this LLM orchestration system, because I can start just like working with some very different data sources and start getting value out of them very quickly. So then I started working through evaluating the system, looking at the hallucinations, and one thing I did is I took some of the context data and I visualized it in Arise AI. So I was able to get this 3D visualization of my social media data. And you can see some like very interesting patterns in this data, the kind of context and concepts that are captured in this data. This is really useful if you're looking for like gaps in your context store, or if you really want to understand some of the higher level patterns in the data that you're working with. Another thing I did was dig into hallucinations. I asked the system some questions where I knew there was no true answer that was known, just to force it to hallucinate, and you can see it kind of get clever with the response there. More interestingly though, I was able to trigger what I think some people would call some hallucinations, which I call creativity and prediction. It definitely looks like the system knows how to make statistical inference. And so when it doesn't know, it spits out something likely. And in the context of this tool and how I want to use it, I find that extremely useful. All right, so what's next for ClaireBot? I've got this personal project wrapped up, talked you through everything that I did. The next step for ClaireBot is I probably don't have time to take it to its next phase. What I'm going to be doing, or what I would like to be doing if I had the time, is to dig a little bit more into like LLM evals. I'd love to see if I can fine tune the systems. Like that fine tuning might even make the hallucinations and the inference a little bit more interesting here. And then I would love to explore like reinforcement learning, human feedback loop. That's definitely something that I think could maybe a more sophisticated way to get the system to be live and learning in real time. But the evolution of this personal project is actually kind of funny. I don't have time to really keep working on it, but I did find a very small startup who is essentially building the same things. So I'll link this up top. It's called CloneCraft, and I just connected with the founder, and what we're gonna be doing is build out a prototype of a AI clone of myself. Some of the bones behind this and the concept is similar to ClaireBot and the personal project that I started. But CloneCraft takes it to a whole new level in terms of like adding video. And so they're creating like video avatars that reflect people's personality and voice that you can interact with. And I'm really excited about the future of something like this. I really love how they're thinking about building this out. So this was a great example where it's like I started building something and then realized like I don't have to build this. I can actually find like amazing people who are already building this out and kind of partner with them on a prototype here. So really excited to be working with them going forward. I definitely have another video that goes into more depth about great personal projects with James Sanders, who has an amazing career and background as a product leader at Wayfair, some additional companies, and he took his kind of experience as like a senior leader at these companies, like he's scoped projects before, he's executed with teams, and he applied that to personal projects. So if you want tips and tricks from someone who's very experienced in the industry and kind of see how he executed his personal projects, I'll definitely link that video down below. So hit me up if anybody has questions about personal projects. I'd love to kind of hear how y'all are approaching this, so drop me a comment. And thanks for tuning in. Bye.